There's one person every avoidant fears losing. Not because they were needy, but because they were the first to see straight through them and walk away anyway. That person is the super empath. There comes a moment in every avoidant's life when they meet someone unlike anyone they've ever known, a person who loves deeply, sees clearly, and gives generously without losing themselves. That person is the super empath. A super empath doesn't just feel emotions, they understand them. Yours, theirs, the space between. They can pick up the quiet tremor in your voice when you're overwhelmed. They can sense when you pull back before you even realize you're doing it. But here's the part that rattles the avoidant to their core. A super empath doesn't chase your distance. They interpret it, and then they make a decision. Avoidants often assume they can outrun connection, hide behind silence, and control the emotional temperature of a relationship with distance. But the super empath? They're the one person who won't dance that dance with you. They won't beg, they won't bargain, and they won't break. Instead, they'll offer patience, clarity, kindness, and if that's mishandled, they will walk away with the same calm with which they tried to love you. The moment the avoidant loses the super empath is the moment they realize something they've never confronted before. They didn't lose someone dependent on them. They lost someone who was strong enough to stay and strong enough to leave. That kind of loss doesn't fade. Because it isn't about rejection, it's about recognition. Recognition that they pushed away the one person who didn't want to trap them, change them, or control them, but simply meet them. The avoidant will replay the moments where kindness was offered and dismissed. Reassurance was needed but never voiced. Love was present but never allowed in. And this time, distance won't feel like power. It will feel like regret. Because once a super empath is done, they are done with grace, done with truth, and done with a depth the avoidant may never experience again. And that is the one loss they never truly recover from. A super empath doesn't fear emotional depth because they've spent their entire life navigating the landscape of human emotion carefully, consciously, and with a level of awareness most people never reach. They aren't overwhelmed by feelings, they're fluent in them. When someone around them is anxious, withdrawing, or conflicted, they can sense it before any words are spoken. They notice the subtle drop in eye contact, the shift in tone, the slight tension in the jaw. These cues aren't intimidating to them. They're information. They allow the super empath to understand what's happening beneath the surface long before the other person gathers the courage to say it aloud. This understanding doesn't come from dependency. It comes from emotional intelligence. They've learned how to sit with discomfort without panicking, how to ask questions without interrogating, how to hold space without smothering. When someone they care about feels overwhelmed, they lean in with curiosity rather than fear. They don't take emotional distance personally, nor do they immediately assume rejection. Instead, they look deeper. They try to understand the story behind the behavior. What sets the super empath apart is that they don't just understand others, they understand themselves. They know what triggers them, what they need, what they can accept, and what they will not tolerate. This self-awareness is the foundation that allows them to be so present with others. They can offer empathy without losing their own center. This balance is what makes their presence feel so safe, so grounding, so different from the experiences most avoidants are used to. Because they aren't afraid of emotion, they don't run from it. They can sit with someone else's fear without letting it shake their own sense of security. They can listen to someone express anger or frustration without assuming they are to blame. They can acknowledge tension without escalating it. This emotional steadiness creates a kind of relational calm that avoidants rarely encounter. A calm that says, I see you, I understand you, and I'm not scared of what you feel. But this depth is not passive. The super empath doesn't simply absorb emotions, they interpret them. They connect dots. They pay attention to patterns. They understand when distance is protective, when silence is fear, and when withdrawal is not about them, but about old wounds resurfacing. This insight allows them to respond with grace rather than panic, patience rather than pressure. They offer emotional safety not through suffocation, but through presence, quiet, steady, and unwavering. And it's this rare combination, deep emotional understanding paired with unwavering self-grounding, that makes their connection so powerful. They don't drown in emotion. They navigate it with a kind of mastery that many people, especially avoidants, have never experienced before. A super empath doesn't chase someone who withdraws because they understand something most people miss. Distance is communication. When someone starts to pull back, fewer messages, shorter responses, less eye contact, a sudden shift from warm to cool, they register it instantly. But instead of panicking or scrambling for reassurance, they simply observe. They know that chasing someone who is retreating only pushes them further away and creates an unhealthy dynamic neither person can sustain. They refuse to participate in a cycle that distorts love into pursuit and affection into pressure. When distance appears, a super empath doesn't take it as a challenge, and they don't see it as an invitation to prove their worth. They're not interested in convincing someone to stay. They're interested in understanding why someone feels the need to leave. Their first instinct is to assess, not attach. They look at the situation with clarity. Is this person overwhelmed? Are they avoiding vulnerability? Are they emotionally unavailable? And most importantly, does this withdrawal reflect where this person is in their own emotional life, rather than any flaw or failure in the relationship? Because they have such a deep sense of self, they don't collapse into fear when someone becomes distant. They don't spiral into overthinking or self-blame. Instead, they lean on their emotional intelligence. They know chasing would compromise their dignity, disrupt the balance of the connection, and ultimately reward avoidant behavior. They won't run after someone just to momentarily soothe the avoidance fear while enabling the very pattern that destroys emotional closeness. They offer connection, not codependency. For the super empath, emotional investment has to be mutual. If the other person retreats into silence, they take that silence as truth, not punishment, not rejection, simply information. They respect a person's need for space, but they also respect themselves too much to fill in the gaps with effort that isn't reciprocated. They understand that real connection cannot be built on one person initiating and the other person evading. It cannot thrive on imbalance, guessing games, or emotional crumbs. Their refusal to chase isn't coldness, it's wisdom. They know that anyone who wants to build something real will communicate, even imperfectly. Anyone who wants closeness will eventually step forward. And anyone who continues to pull away is showing exactly where they stand. The super empath doesn't punish distance, but they don't fight it either. They simply let it be. They give the avoidant the space they're taking, not as a tactic, but as a truth. Connection cannot be sustained by one person running towards someone who only runs away. A super empath's boundaries are as strong as their empathy because their compassion is rooted in self-respect, not self-sacrifice. They care deeply, but they've learned through experience that caring without limits is the fastest path to emotional exhaustion. So while they love with generosity, they protect themselves with intention. They can be warm, giving, and understanding, yet still hold a firm line when behavior becomes disrespectful, inconsistent, or emotionally unsafe. This balance is what makes them so unique. They don't have to choose between kindness and self-worth. They live in both. When they enter a relationship, they bring openness, patience, and emotional clarity. They listen with presence, validate feelings sincerely, and offer support freely. But unlike people who confuse empathy with overextension, a super empath knows exactly where their responsibility ends. They can hold space for someone's pain without absorbing it. They can understand someone's fear without excusing hurtful actions that come from it. They don't let their emotional insight become a justification for tolerating patterns that erode their peace. Their boundaries aren't walls, they're filters. They don't block connection, they protect it. If someone is struggling, the super empath will stand beside them. But if someone starts to chip away at their emotional well-being, they won't quietly endure it. They'll speak up with honesty, not hostility. They'll set limits with calm, not chaos. They'll express their needs clearly because they understand that without mutual respect, intimacy cannot grow. One of the defining strengths of a super empath is their refusal to diminish themselves for someone else's comfort. They won't shrink to make someone feel bigger, silence themselves to avoid conflict, or pretend to be fine just to keep the peace. Their empathy makes them attuned to others, but their boundaries keep them loyal to themselves. If someone continually takes without giving, they won't stay in denial or cling to potential. They'll recognize the imbalance and adjust accordingly. Because they have this balance, they create an environment where healthy love can thrive. They offer connection without pressure, support without enabling, understanding without self-erasure. They know that the right person will meet them where they stand, not take advantage of their capacity to forgive and understand. And when someone crosses a line, they don't explode or plead. They simply enforce their standards. This is why avoidants find them so disarming. They can't manipulate them with distance, silence, or emotional unpredictability. The super empath will offer compassion, but they won't tolerate inconsistency. They will give deeply, but only within the framework of their own self-worth. This combination of openness and strength is rare, and it's exactly what makes their presence unforgettable. Losing a super empath reveals a truth that an avoidant often avoids because it forces a confrontation with something they usually try to sidestep: the consequences of pushing away someone who loved them fully without demands or conditions. Avoidants are familiar with relationships where emotional closeness feels threatening, where vulnerability triggers discomfort, and where independence is prioritized over connection. They have perfected the art of withdrawal, the ability to detach, and the skill of evading intimacy, often without realizing the impact on the other person. When they meet a super empath, however, this pattern is challenged in ways they can't easily dismiss. A super empath doesn't react to their withdrawal with panic, drama, or coercion. Instead, they respond with clarity and self-respect, showing that love does not have to be a negotiation of worth or a battle for attention. The super empath's presence exposes the avoidance avoidance. Every attempt to retreat is noticed, every hesitation to engage is understood, and every moment of distance is met with calm observation rather than frantic reassurance. This level of awareness makes it impossible for the avoidant to hide behind their usual defenses. They cannot manipulate the situation with silence or control it with emotional games because the super empath interprets their behavior without judgment. In losing this person, the avoidant finally sees the cost of their habitual withdrawal, not in anger, but in the absence of someone irreplaceable. Avoidants often underestimate the significance of losing a person who is both deeply empathetic and firmly grounded. They might assume that love can always be found again, or that someone else will eventually fill the void. But a super empath is not replaceable in the usual sense. They offer a rare combination of emotional intelligence, patience, and self-respect that others often lack. The avoidant experiences the loss not merely as someone leaving, but as the disappearance of the one person who understood them completely without compromising themselves. This realization is uncomfortable because it confronts the avoidant with a mirror of their own patterns. They see the ways they pushed love away, avoided intimacy, and created distance, and there is no one left to accommodate those behaviors. The absence of a super empath forces reflection in a way that other losses do not. It is a quiet, persistent ache rooted not in rejection, but in recognition. The avoidant cannot rationalize it away with blame or distraction because the loss itself carries an undeniable truth. They lost someone who loved wisely, fiercely, and without dependency. It is a truth that lingers, gradually reshaping their understanding of connection, boundaries, and the rare, irreplaceable value of someone who gave their heart fully while remaining whole. The exit of a super empath is the turning point that an avoidant never forgets because it crystallizes a reality they often evade, the consequences of their emotional patterns. Avoidants are accustomed to controlling relationships by maintaining distance, keeping their emotions compartmentalized, and retreating when things feel too close. For years, this strategy may have allowed them to navigate intimacy without feeling vulnerable or trapped. Yet, the super empath's departure exposes the limits of that strategy. Unlike others who might cling, argue, or attempt to reel them back in, the super empath leaves quietly, decisively, and without drama. There is no chase, no manipulation, no desperate effort to hold on to them. They simply honor their own boundaries and choose themselves. For the avoidant, this absence is impossible to ignore. The uniqueness of this loss lies in the nature of the connection that preceded it. The super empath offered more than just love. They offered presence, understanding, and insight. They witnessed the avoidant's fears and defenses without judgment. They navigated the push and pull with patience, and they gave space without abandoning care. In losing them, the avoidant realizes that this was not a typical relationship where someone could be replaced or forgotten. It was a connection built on mutual recognition, grounded empathy, and emotional honesty, qualities the avoidant rarely encounters and even more rarely cultivates in themselves. The loss is therefore felt as a profound absence of both love and understanding. What makes this departure unforgettable is the avoidant's sudden confrontation with regret. There is no opportunity to misinterpret intentions or convince themselves that the super empath was just like anyone else. Every act of kindness, every moment of patience, every expression of unconditional understanding comes back to them with clarity. They replay conversations, gestures, and moments of vulnerability, seeing in retrospect how much was offered and how little was received in return. Unlike losses where denial or rationalization can soften the pain, this loss is a mirror reflecting the avoidant's own emotional limitations. It highlights the ways they avoided closeness, pushed love away, and remained closed off even when invited in. The memory of a super empath lingers because they leave an imprint of emotional truth. Their departure is not a reaction to anger or betrayal. It is a deliberate choice rooted in self-respect and clarity. For the avoidant, this is an experience that cannot be unlearned. They feel the absence in ways that other losses do not replicate, and the lesson embedded in that absence is inescapable. It is a loss that teaches what it feels like to push away someone irreplaceable, someone whose presence was transformative yet respectfully unyielding. This experience reshapes the avoidant's understanding of connection, revealing a depth of love, empathy, and self-possession that they may never encounter again in quite the same way. In the end, the super empath is more than just a partner. They are a mirror, a guide, and a boundary setter who shows avoidants a love that is patient, clear, and unwavering. Losing them isn't just losing a person. It's losing the rare opportunity to be fully seen, fully understood, and still fully respected. And that is a lesson that stays with you long after the door closes. So, to everyone listening today, remember this: the people who love wisely and deeply are precious. Protect them, appreciate them, and never take their presence for granted, because once they choose to leave, they leave with a clarity and grace that cannot be replaced. Thank you for allowing me to share this message with you today. I hope it inspires reflection, connection, and a deeper understanding of the value of empathy in relationships. Stay aware, stay compassionate, and above all, honor the rare hearts that choose to walk beside you with strength and kindness. Thank you and goodbye.